The first thing Jarek noticed was the heat. A three-pronged brand seared his retinas, turning the world into a fiery haze. Then came the sand. Gritty and unforgiving, it filled his mouth, his nose, his ears. Groaning, he pushed himself out of the smoldering wreckage, the remnants of his escape pod twisted like a crumpled soda can. Xor. That was the cursed planet name flashing on the emergency beacon he barely managed to activate. A desolate wasteland, 3 suns a constant, merciless glare in the sky. Jarek cursed under his breath. Disgraced soldier, they called him. Now stranded exile. A low, guttural growl ripped through the silence. Jarek whipped around, hand flying to the hilt that wasn't there. His energy blade, Quicksilver, a parting gift from his former squad leader, wasn't functioning. Its blade had likely been vaporized in the crash. Movement in the distance, a blur of white against the crimson dunes. It resolved into a figure clad in flowing robes, the headdress adorned with what looked like polished beetle shells. A woman, her face a mask of cool defiance. Her eyes, the color of twilight, narrowed at the sight of Jarek. "You," she said, her voice a low rasp, "are a long way from wherever you crawled out of." Jarek, his throat parched, managed a sardonic grin. "Likewise, princess. Unless you have a water fountain hidden under your fancy robes, I suggest we get moving." The woman's gaze flickered to the wreckage behind him. "You are not from here. What brings the Skydweller to Zar?" Jarek, ever the charmer, replied. "Just sightseeing." "Now about that water." The woman's hand darted towards a strange device on her belt. Before she could react, a monstrous roar echoed across the dunes. A colossal sandworm, its body segmented and glistening with a greasy sheen, erupted from the sand, its maw wide open. Jarek may have lost his ship and his weapon, but his reflexes were still sharp. He lunged past the woman, grabbing a discarded metal rod from the wreckage as he went. This wasteland might be a death sentence, but he wasn't giving up without a fight. As the monstrous beast closed in, he swung the makeshift club with all his might, striking the worm's segmented hide with a dull thud. The sandworm recoiled, its massive bulk sliding back into the shifting sands. Jarek turned to the woman, expecting thanks or at least a nod of acknowledgement. Instead, she was already drawing her strange device from its sheath, its blades whirring ominously. Before he could react, she hurled it at him with deadly precision. The device struck Jarek in the chest, sending a jolt of pain through his body. As he stumbled back, he realized that his energy blade had somehow been restored. The weapon pulsed in his grasp, its energy field humming. He raised it to defend himself, just as the woman lunged at him, her movements blurring. Their blades met in a flurry of sparks, a duel that seemed to last an eternity. Jarek parried her attacks with a mixture of skill and desperation, their weapons clashing like a chorus of angry wasps. Sweat trickled down his forehead, stinging his eyes as he struggled to keep his focus. The sandworm loomed closer, its massive bulk a reminder of their precarious situation. They had to end this fight soon. With a final burst of strength, Jarek feinted to one side and brought his energy blade down on the woman's shoulder. She cried out in pain, but did not fall. Instead, she twisted her body and sent them both tumbling to the ground. Their blades clattered to the sand as they rolled apart, gasping for breath. Blood trickled from the woman's shoulder, mingling with the sand. For a moment, they stared at each other, the hate and anger in their eyes mirroring the fires of Zar's 3 suns. Then, slowly, the woman reached out her hand. "A truce, soldier?" she asked. "We are both strangers in this place. Together, we might survive." Jarek eyed her warily, but nodded. He grasped her outstretched hand, feeling the strength and resilience in her grip. "A truce," he agreed. "But only until we find a way off this cursed rock." Together, they rose to their feet, facing the massive form of the sandworm, now looming closer than ever. They exchanged a brief glance, and then, side by side, they charged. The beast reared up, its segmented body towering above them, its jaws gaping wide. Jarek raised his energy blade, the power surging through him as he prepared to strike. The woman, her movements fluid and graceful, drew a small, glittering knife from her belt. They leapt, simultaneously launching their attacks. The woman's knife flashed like a silver streak, scoring deep gashes in the worm's hide. Jarek's energy blade sliced through the air, leaving a trail of sparks as it sought purchase on the worm's flesh. The sandworm thrashed and writhed, its massive bulk throwing them both off balance. They tumbled across the sand, rolling and scrambling to regain their footing. The beast roared, its breath washing over them like a gust of hot wind. They rose once more, bloodied but unbowed. The woman tossed her knife, and it embedded itself hilt deep in the worm's eye. The creature convulsed, writhing in agony before collapsing lifelessly to the sand. For a moment, they stood in silence, surveying the fallen beast. Then, with a nod, they turned to face each other. "Shall we see what lies beyond those dunes?" she asked, gesturing towards the horizon. Jarek hesitated. He had no ship, no weapon, and no real idea where they were. But something about this woman, this stranger who had fought at his side, filled him with a sense of hope. "Yes," he replied, taking a step forward. "Let's find our way home." Together they began to walk, leaving the carcass of the sandworm behind them as they disappeared over the first dune. The wind howled, the sands shifted, and the sons of Xar continued their eternal dance across the sky. But for now, at least, they had each other. As they crested the dune, they found themselves looking down upon a vast, shimmering plain. It stretched out as far as the eye could see, a sea of silver and blue. The air above it shimmered with an unearthly radiance, and they could feel the power emanating from it, like a tangible thing. "What is that place?" Jarek asked, squinting against the brightness. "And how do we get there?" The woman shook her head, her expression thoughtful. "I do not know," she replied. "But I feel drawn to it, as if it holds the key to our freedom." They continued on, the wind whipping their clothes and sand stinging their exposed skin. As they drew closer, they began to make out individual shapes within the shimmering surface of the plain. They were structures of some sort, towering spires that pierced the sky and cast long, sinuous shadows across the landscape. "Perhaps those are the ruins of an ancient city," Jarek ventured. "One that predates the coming of the Xazrix." The woman turned to him, her eyes alight with hope. "Then perhaps there are others here, survivors from before the reign of the Overlord. Perhaps they can help us find our way home." They reached the edge of the plain, and cautiously began to descend its sloping surface. As they drew nearer, they could feel the power emanating from the structures growing stronger, coursing through their veins like an intoxicating drug. It was invigorating, exhilarating, and terrifying all at once. Finally, they stood before the base of one of the towering spires, its surface etched with faded glyphs and symbols. They gazed up at its heights, wondering what secrets it held. "We must be brave," the woman said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "We must summon our courage and face whatever lies ahead. Together." Jarek nodded, taking a deep breath. "Together," he echoed. And then, with a sense of determination born of desperation, they stepped forward, ascending the winding path that led up the side of the great spire. Their journey was long and arduous, fraught with peril and challenge. They encountered traps and guardians, both living and mechanical, that tested their mettle and their bond. But they persevered, for they knew that their freedom, and the freedom of their people, depended upon their success. At last, they reached the top of the spire, stepping out onto a broad balcony that overlooked the entire plain. Before them lay the heart of the city, a vast, gleaming structure that pulsed with energy. Its walls were inlaid with precious gems and metals, and its towers soared into the heavens, piercing the clouds. "This must be it," the woman breathed. "This is our freedom." Jarek nodded, his heart racing with hope and anticipation. Together, they approached the massive doors that barred their way, feeling the power of the city coursing through their veins. With a final burst of strength, they pushed the doors open, stepping into a new world, a world where the Xazrix no longer ruled. The first thing they saw was a group of figures, huddled together in the center of the chamber. They were humanoid in shape, but their skin glowed with an inner light, and they were adorned with jewels and finery that glittered in the dim light. "Who are you?" one of them asked, her voice soft and musical. "And how did you find your way here?" Jarek and the woman exchanged a meaningful glance. "We are soldiers of the old empire," Jarek replied, his voice steady. "We have come to reclaim what is ours." The figures looked at each other, their expressions a mix of surprise and hope. "Then you are welcome here," the one who had spoken said. "For we too have been waiting for you." As they stood there, the power of the city flowed around them, binding them together in a circle of strength and determination. For they were not alone, they were not strangers. They were brothers and sisters in arms, united by a common goal. And together, they would bring down the tyrannical rule of the Overlord and restore the old empire to its former glory. They would tear down the walls of oppression, smash the chains of servitude, and unleash the power of freedom upon the world. They would be the harbingers of a new dawn, a new era of peace and prosperity for all the races and creatures that dwelt within the realm. As they stood there, basking in the radiance of hope and possibility, they felt a sudden surge of energy coursing through their veins. It was as if the very city itself was reaching out to them, bestowing upon them the strength and courage they would need to face the challenges that lay ahead. They were no longer mere mortals, but beings imbued with the power of destiny, bound together by the unbreakable ties of brotherhood and sisterhood. Their journey had only just begun, but they knew, without a doubt, that they were unstoppable. They were the vanguard of a new age, and the world would never be the same. As they walked forward, hand in hand, their footsteps echoing through the halls of the great city, they were no longer Jarek and the woman, but the embodiment of the old empire's unbreakable spirit, a force of nature that would reshape the world in their image. The colossal doors groaned shut behind them, plunging the chamber into a dim, ethereal glow. Jarek blinked, adjusting his eyes to the strange light emanating from the walls, a luminescence that pulsed with an otherworldly rhythm. The woman, whose name he still didn't know, stood beside him, her face a mask of awestruck curiosity. Before them, a gathering of figures awaited. Tall and slender, their skin shimmered with a pearlescent sheen, unlike anything Jarek had ever encountered. Their garments, fashioned from some unknown material that shimmered like captured starlight, whispered of an advanced civilization that dwarfed anything he knew of Earth or Xar. One of the figures, a woman with eyes as deep and luminous as the swirling sands, stepped forward. Her voice, when she spoke, was a melodic chime that resonated deep within Jarek's bones. "Welcome, travelers from afar. We have awaited your arrival for many cycles." Jarek found himself speechless, his earthly bravado momentarily subdued by the sheer strangeness of it all. The woman beside him, however, seemed to recover quicker. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice a steady counterpoint to the unsettling beauty of the chamber. "And what is this place?" "We are the Ethel," the luminous woman replied, her gaze encompassing them both. "Guardians of this hidden city, keepers of the knowledge of the ancients." Jarek's mind raced. Ancients? What ancients? Could this place somehow be connected to the legends of the Xazrix, the tyrannical alien overlords who had enslaved the planet millennia ago? Did these Ethel hold the key to overthrowing the current Xazrix regime, the Iron Horde? He cleared his throat, forcing the questions down for now. "We come seeking answers," he said, his voice gruff. "Answers about this world, about the Xazrix, and a way to get back, home." The Ethel woman's eyes softened with understanding. "Home," she echoed, the words seeming to hold a different weight in her alien tongue. "A yearning that transcends worlds, it seems." She gestured towards a central dais, where a crystal sphere pulsed with an ever-changing light show. "This is the Nexus, a repository of ancient knowledge. It can answer your questions, but at a cost." Jarek frowned. "What cost?" The Ethel woman's smile was both sorrowful and serene. "A glimpse into the past can be a heavy burden. It can reveal truths best left forgotten. Are you prepared to face them?" Jarek glanced at the woman beside him. Her eyes, no longer narrowed with suspicion, held a flicker of determination. He nodded, a steely resolve hardening his voice. "We are." Jarek and the woman exchanged glances, their expressions resolute. He nodded to the Ethel woman, silently asking if they should proceed. She dipped her head in acknowledgement. They stepped forward, their footfalls muffled by the soft carpet of starlight that covered the floor. Jarek placed his hand on the crystal sphere, feeling its cool surface against his skin. He closed his eyes, steeling himself for what was to come. The world spun, and the chamber faded away, replaced by a kaleidoscope of images and sounds. Scenes flashed before his eyes, vast cities of towering spires, their streets teeming with life, armies of golden warriors marching across endless plains, and the towering form of a Xazrix emperor, his cruel, inhuman face etched into history. There were other things, too, more personal moments: a young woman laughing in the sunlight, her eyes like pools of liquid silver, a group of children playing in a meadow, their laughter filling the air, and a man, older and wiser, with Jarek's face, standing beside him, his hand on his shoulder, whispering words of wisdom and encouragement. The visions came faster now, a blur of light and sound that threatened to overwhelm him. And then, as abruptly as it had begun, it stopped. He opened his eyes, gasping for breath, the weight of the past pressing down on him like a physical burden. "Welcome home, Jarek," said a voice soft as silk. Jarek turned to see the Ethel woman, her face serene. Beside her stood the woman from Earth, her expression unreadable. "You have seen the truth of your past, and the potential for your future." He nodded, his throat too tight to speak. "The knowledge you have gained," the Ethel woman continued, "is a burden that you must now bear. But it is also a gift, for with it you have the power to change the course of history." Jarek looked from the Ethel woman to the woman from Earth, and then back again. He swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the past settling into his bones. He knew what he had to do. "I will," he said, his voice strong despite the tremor in his chest. "I will use this knowledge to make a difference, to change the course of history for the better. I will not let the pain and suffering of my past be in vain." The woman from Earth nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "And I will be by your side," she said. "Together, we can make a difference." The Ethel woman smiled, her expression gentle and reassuring. "The future is not set in stone, Jarek. You have the power to shape it, to create a world where the horrors of the past are but distant memories. It will not be easy, but you are not alone." With that, she stepped back, gesturing for them to follow. They left the Nexus, the ethereal light of the starlight guiding their way through the endless tunnels and chambers of the Ethel civilization. As they walked, Jarek could feel the weight of the knowledge he had gained beginning to lift, replaced by a sense of purpose and resolve. He glanced at the woman beside him, grateful for her presence and her unwavering support. "Where do we go from here?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She smiled, her expression confident and strong. "We go home," she said, "to make a new future." Together, they continued on their journey, their steps echoing through the halls of the past and into the uncertain future. They had been given a gift, a chance to shape the world in a better way, and they were determined not to waste it. The path ahead would be fraught with danger and uncertainty, but they were ready to face it, together. The memory lingered, a bittersweet ache in Jarek's chest. The woman from his vision, the one with eyes like pools of liquid silver, haunted him. Her laughter echoed in his mind, a melody tinged with a strange familiarity. He yearned to understand, to know who she was and how she fit into his present reality. He stole a glance at the woman beside him. Though she hadn't revealed her name, their shared experience with the Nexus had forged a silent bond. Perhaps, he thought, she held the key to unlocking the mysteries of his visions. "There was a woman," he began hesitantly, his voice rough with unspoken emotions. "In the visions, she looked like you." The woman turned to him, her gaze steady. "There are echoes across time, Jarek," she said, her voice surprisingly gentle. "The Ethel believe that sometimes the souls of those we have loved in past lives can find us again in the present." Jarek's mind reeled. Was this woman truly the reincarnation of his past love? Or was it a mere coincidence, a trick of his own yearning? He recounted the details of the vision, the laughter in the sunlight, the feeling of warmth and belonging. As he spoke, he saw a flicker of recognition in the woman's eyes, a fleeting moment that sent a jolt through him. I remember fragments," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. Flashes of sunlight, a meadow filled with wildflowers, a feeling of safety and love. The shared memories hung between them, a fragile thread connecting past and present. Jarek felt a surge of hope, a possibility that defied logic. Could this woman, this stranger from another world, truly be a part of his soul's history? "Do you think," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "do you think we were?" She reached out, her touch sending sparks dancing across his skin. Her eyes held a depth of understanding that seemed to transcend time itself. "Perhaps," she said softly, "our souls are drawn together for a reason. Perhaps this lifetime, this chance encounter, is meant to fulfill a destiny left unfinished." Jarek didn't know what to believe, but the warmth in her touch, the echo of familiarity in her eyes, was a comfort he couldn't deny. The past remained a puzzle, but the connection they shared felt real, a bond forged in the crucible of their shared experience. He knew they needed answers, not just about his past life, but about the future they were determined to create. With a newfound resolve, he looked at her, the question hanging heavy in the air. "Then let's find out," he said, his voice steady. Together, they made their way back to the main camp, their steps in perfect synchrony. The other members of the group, their faces etched with weariness and determination, nodded in acknowledgement of their shared experience. The woman beside Jarek, still unnamed, radiated a newfound confidence and purpose. As they walked, they discussed their plans for the future, their voices low and earnest as they outlined their vision for a better world. "We will need to find allies," she said, her gaze fixed on a distant horizon. "Those who share our goals and our dreams. We must reach out, not just to the people of this world, but to the stars as well." Jarek felt a thrill of excitement at the possibilities she suggested. "And what of our enemies?" he asked, his voice edged with determination. "We cannot simply ignore the danger they pose." She smiled, her eyes bright with determination. "No, we cannot. But we will not be defined by them, nor will we let them dictate our actions. We will face them, yes, but always with the knowledge that there is a better world waiting for us, if we have the courage to fight for it." They reached the central fire, its flames dancing in the darkness. The woman turned to Jarek, her expression solemn. "You must decide," she said, "whether you wish to share this burden with me, to let me be your partner in this fight. If you do, then I will stand by your side, always." Jarek hesitated for only a moment, the weight of her words heavy upon him. He thought of the visions, the memory of the woman who had loved him so long ago. He thought of the future they could build together, the world they could shape. And in that moment, he knew what he had to do. "Yes," he said, his voice steady. "I choose you." The woman's eyes lit up with a fierce joy, and she threw her arms around him, pulling him close. For a moment, they were lost in the embrace, their hearts beating in unison. When they finally drew apart, she looked at him with a newfound respect, her expression filled with hope and determination. "Together," she said softly, "we will change the course of history." As they stood there, the other members of the group began to gather around them, their faces a mix of curiosity and anticipation. Jarek felt the weight of their expectations, but he also felt a surge of strength and purpose. He knew that they were all in this together, bound by their shared experience and their unwavering commitment to creating a better world. The woman who had chosen him, who had pledged herself to him, stepped forward. "My name," she said, her voice strong and clear, "is Madeline." A murmur ran through the crowd, some nodding in acknowledgement, others looking surprised or even a little dismayed. But Jarek didn't care about their reactions. He was focused on Madeline, on the future that lay before them, and on the journey they would take together. As they began to plan their next steps, discussing tactics and strategy, seeking allies and preparing for the challenges that lay ahead, Jarek couldn't shake the sense that something else was happening, something beyond their control. It was as if the very fabric of reality was shifting, as if the threads of fate were weaving themselves together into a tapestry that only they could see. He glanced at Madeline, and saw the same thought reflected in her eyes. They knew that their journey was only just beginning, and that the path ahead would be fraught with danger and uncertainty. But they also knew that they were not alone, and that together, they could face anything. Madeline, her fire-bright eyes fixed on the flames, spoke of whispers among her people, legends of a warrior reborn, a soul marked by the stars. Could Jarek be that warrior? The weight of the prophecy settled heavily on him. But what of you, Madeline? He asked, his voice hoarse. Do the stories speak of your role in this fight? A flicker of sadness crossed her features. My people believe I am the descendant of a guardian spirit, a protector of balance. But the details are shrouded in time. As they delved deeper into their shared experiences, a chilling realization dawned on them. The visions Jarek witnessed weren't just glimpses of the past. They were echoes of a future they desperately needed to avoid. The Xazrix, their iron grip tightening on the galaxy, were planning a cataclysmic event that would consume entire worlds. Meanwhile, a tremor ran through the camp. A scout burst in, his face etched with fear. They're here, he gasped. A Xazrix patrol approaches. Jarek's heart pounded. The enemy was closer than they thought. He exchanged a resolute glance with Madeline. This was their first test, their chance to prove the Ethel's prophecy held weight. With a battle cry that echoed through the canyons, Jarek and Madeline led their ragtag group of rebels into the fray. The clash of steel echoed under the harsh glare of the three suns, a desperate fight for survival that would determine the fate of countless worlds. The Xazrix patrol materialized over the horizon like a monstrous insect, its carapace glinting obsidian black under the triple suns. Jarek's stomach churned, a cocktail of fear and defiance bubbling within him. Madeline, her silver braid whipping in the wind, gripped her strange, shimmering blade, her eyes burning with a steely resolve. Remember our training, she yelled above the rising roar of the approaching craft. Hit them fast, hit them hard, and don't let their shields hold. Jarek nodded, his grip tightening on the energy blade that pulsed faintly in his hand. It felt different now, somehow stronger, charged with the knowledge he'd gleaned from the Ethel. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was a conduit for a power older than Xar itself. The Xazrix patrol screeched to a halt, spewing sand as its landing gear dug into the dunes. Four hulking figures clad in jet-black armor, their faces obscured by visors, emerged from the craft, their heavy weapons aimed at the ragtag rebel force. Jarek let out a guttural war cry and charged, the rest of the rebels following suit. Madeline, a blur of silver and steel, darted around a massive sand dune, flanking the Xazrix soldiers. Jarek clashed with the lead soldier, his energy blade singing as it met the Xazrix's energy shield. But unlike the Xazrix weapons, Jarek's blade seemed to bite through the shield, leaving a smoking gash. The Xazrix soldier roared in surprise, stumbling back. Jarek pressed his advantage, a flurry of strikes pushing the alien back towards the sand dune. Madeline emerged from behind, her blade a blinding flash that sliced through the soldier's leg. With a sickening crunch, the Xazrix crumpled to the sand. The remaining Xazrix opened fire, their energy blasts tearing through the air. Jarek rolled behind a rock, taking cover as the rebels scattered. He winced as a searing pain lanced through his shoulder, the remnants of his escape pod armor barely offering protection. He gritted his teeth, adrenaline masking the pain, and scanned the battlefield. Two more Xazrix lay deactivated, their armor sparking and smoking. But Madeline was in trouble, locked in a deadly dance with the final Xazrix soldier. The soldier, its movements precise and brutal, cornered Madeline against the rock face. It swung its heavy weapon, a serrated blade that shimmered with a dark energy. Madeline ducked, her agility barely saving her. But the blow grazed her shoulder, a spray of crimson staining her white robes. Fury surged through Jarek. He couldn't let them take Madeline. Ignoring the burning pain in his shoulder, he propelled himself into the fray. With a desperate lunge, he slammed into the Xazrix soldier, knocking it off balance. The Xazrix whirled around, its visor fixing on Jarek. It raised its weapon for a killing blow, but Madeline, fueled by a desperate rage, lunged forward. Her shimmering blade sliced through the Xazrix's chest, its dark energy crackling as it sputtered and fell. Jarek slumped to his knees, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The adrenaline was fading, the pain in his shoulder a throbbing reminder of his injuries. He looked at Madeline, her face pale but determined. "We did it," she said, her voice shaky. Jarek managed a weak smile. Together. They surveyed the battlefield, the silence punctuated by the distant hum of the now disabled Xazrix patrol craft. The rebels, battered and bruised, began to gather around them, their faces etched with relief and awe. Jarek knew this was just the first battle. The fight against the Xazrix had begun. But as he looked around at the rebels, their faces illuminated by the triple suns, a sense of hope bloomed in his chest. They weren't just a ragtag bunch anymore. They were a resistance, a spark of rebellion that could ignite the galaxy. As the rebels tended to their wounded, Jarek and Madeline stood side by side, gazing at the Xazrix patrol craft. They had won the first skirmish, but the war had only just begun. "We need to warn the Ethel," Jarek said, his voice raspy. "The Xazrix are coming, and they know of the hidden cities." Madeline nodded, her expression grim. "They will need to prepare. But we need a plan too. We need to find a way to strike back, a way to cripple the Xazrix before they can launch their full attack." Jarek looked out across the desolate landscape of Xar, his mind churning with possibilities. The visions from the Nexus, the knowledge of his past life, and the tactical skills honed during his time with the Ethel all came together, forming a plan that he was sure would work. But he knew he couldn't do it alone. He turned to Madeline, his trusted friend and confidant. "We need to strike at their heart," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We need to destroy the Xazrix homeworld." Madeline's eyes widened in surprise, but she didn't hesitate. "How?" she asked. "We have no ships, no weapons. We are but a handful of rebels against an empire." Jarek smiled grimly. "No," he replied. "We have something they don't expect. Something they can never defend against." He gestured to the sky, where the triple suns blazed brightly. "We have the suns themselves." Madeline frowned, confused. "I don't understand. How can the suns help us?" "Think back to your studies of the ancient civilizations, Madeline," Jarek said, his voice growing more confident. "The Nexus showed us how they harnessed the power of the suns, how they controlled the very fabric of reality. We can do the same. With the Nexus, we can draw upon the energy of the suns, focus it, and strike at the Xazrix with the force of a supernova." Madeline's eyes lit up with understanding. "You mean to create a sunburst?" she breathed. "Exactly," Jarek said, nodding. "With the help of the Ethel and the other rebel factions, we can gather the necessary resources, build a device that will focus the sun's energy, and launch it toward the Xazrix homeworld. When it detonates, it will destroy them all." They fell silent, contemplating the gravity of their plan. The fate of the galaxy rested on their shoulders, and the risks were enormous. But they had come too far, sacrificed too much, to back down now. Jarek could see the determination in Madeline's eyes, the steel in her spine. She was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. "Then let us begin," Madeline said, her voice steady. "We will gather the rebels, we will find the Ethel, and we will bring down the Xazrix Empire." Jarek nodded, his heart swelling with pride. Together they would forge a new future, free from the tyranny of the Xazrix. They would harness the power of the suns, and they would write their own destiny. The battle to retake Xar had only just begun, but with each step forward, each victory won, Jarek felt more and more certain that they would emerge triumphant. They were no longer a ragtag bunch of rebels, but a unified force, a symbol of hope for all those who had been oppressed. As they set off across the desolate landscape, their numbers growing with each passing day, Jarek and Madeline knew that they were on the brink of something truly historic. The Xazrix Empire would fall, and a new age of peace and prosperity would rise from its ashes. It was only a matter of time. And so, they marched on, their eyes fixed on the horizon, their hearts filled with the fire of freedom and the certainty of victory. The Xazrix had awoken a sleeping giant, and now they would pay the price. The war for the fate of the galaxy had begun, and it would end with the Xazrix homeworld reduced to a starless void. As the suns beat down upon them, Jarek felt their power coursing through his veins, fueling his determination. He knew that soon, very soon, they would harness that power, and unleash it upon their enemies. And when they did, there would be no escape, no mercy. The Xazrix would be destroyed, and a new era would begin. He glanced at Madeline, walking beside him, her eyes fixed on the horizon. He could see the determination in her stride, the confidence in her bearing. They were a formidable team, these two, each bringing their own unique strengths to the table. She was the strategist, the planner, while he was more of a tactician, always ready to adapt to the changing landscape of the battlefield. Together, they made a formidable force, a leader among leaders. As they marched, their numbers grew, swelling with rebels and allies from all corners of the galaxy. The Ethel, the powerful ancient race, had finally heeded their call, lending their ships and resources to the cause. The Necris, the enigmatic race of assassins, had pledged their loyalty, their deadly skills at their disposal. The Kithrii, the nomadic traders, had brought their vast network of connections, their influence spreading like wildfire across the stars. And then there were the humans, the people of Earth, who had risen up against the Xazrix occupation, fighting for their freedom, their homes, their very existence. Their courage, their resilience, had inspired Jarek and Madeline from the beginning, and they would continue to do so until the end. The plan was set in motion, meticulously crafted by Madeline and her strategic mind. They would strike at the Xazrix homeworld with a weapon of unimaginable power, harnessing the energy of the suns themselves. The Xazrix would never see it coming, would never have time to react. The battle would be swift, brutal, and merciless. And when it was all over, when the dust had settled and the smoke had cleared, a new era would dawn. An era of peace, of prosperity, of freedom. The galaxy would be theirs to shape, theirs to mold. They would be the heroes, the liberators, the saviors of all those who had suffered under the heel of the Xazrix Empire. Jarek looked back at Madeline, a smile spreading across his face. They were so close now, so close to realizing their dream. He knew, without a doubt, that they would succeed. The fate of the galaxy rested on their shoulders, and they would not fail. The thought filled him with a sense of purpose, of destiny. He reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "We did it, Madeline," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "We actually did it." She smiled back at him, her eyes shining with tears. "We did, Jarek. We did." Together, they continued to march, their steps now lighter, their hearts full of hope. The suns bathed them in their warm, golden light, and Jarek couldn't help but feel that they were somehow blessing them, guiding them toward their destiny. As they neared the Xazrix homeworld, the fleet of rebel ships and allies grew larger by the minute. The Ethel ships, towering above all others, their hulls shimmering like liquid metal in the light, led the charge. The Necris vessels, sleek and deadly, flanked them on either side. The Kithrii ships, their hulls adorned with intricate designs and vibrant colors, brought up the rear, their engines humming softly. And there, at the center of it all, were the human ships, their hulls battered and scarred from countless battles, but still proudly bearing the colors of their flag. They had fought against impossible odds, against an enemy that seemed invincible. But they had persevered, and now they were on the verge of victory. The attack plan unfolded with precision, a symphony of destruction and chaos. The Ethel ships, their weapons fire guided by the Necris, began to batter the Xazrix homeworld's defenses, creating a path for the other ships to follow. The Kithrii ships, using their nimbleness and network of connections, provided support where it was needed, engaging smaller enemy vessels and harassing larger ones. And then, as the Xazrix fleet scrambled to respond, the human ships, their engines roaring, emerged from hyperspace directly in the path of the enemy's command center. A barrage of plasma torpedoes and laser fire erupted from their hulls, crippling the massive structure in a blaze of light and sound. With a final, wrenching groan, the command center exploded, sending fragments of metal and glass raining down upon the surface of the planet below. As the fleets clashed, Jarek felt a tremor of doubt. Madeline's plan, while audacious, relied heavily on the Ethel's technology. What if it malfunctioned? He glanced at Madeline, her face a mask of steely resolve. He pushed his doubts aside. They were in this together. Suddenly, a booming voice filled the bridge, emanating from the Ethel flagship. We have encountered unforeseen difficulties. The voice crackled. The Xazrix possess a shielding technology that disrupts our energy transfer. Jarek's heart sank. This was not part of the plan. Panic threatened to consume the bridge crew, but Madeline remained calm. Focus fire on the shielding generators, she barked. Across the human fleet, captains relayed the order. Lasers converged on designated points on the Xazrix homeworld, overloading the shields. A cheer erupted on the bridge as the shields flickered and died. Jarek felt a surge of renewed hope. This was their chance. Initiate the sunburst sequence, Madeline commanded, her voice ringing with authority. The bridge pulsed with a blinding light as the Nexus device, a swirling vortex of energy at the heart of the ship, began to channel the power of the suns. The human fleet held its breath as the energy built, a crackling ball of raw power threatening to burst forth. Suddenly, a new voice sliced through the tension. Stand down, rebels! It was a Xazrix commander, his voice laced with desperation. We surrender! You cannot destroy us! Jarek exchanged a glance with Madeline. A surrender? Was this a trap? Madeline's lips curled into a determined smile. The offer is tempting, she said, her voice broadcast across the entire fleet. But the Xazrix reign of terror ends today. With a resolute nod, she slammed her fist down on the control panel. The sunburst weapon unleashed its fury, a torrent of raw solar energy lancing towards the Xazrix homeworld. A blinding white light engulfed the planet, followed by a deafening silence. When the light faded, all that remained of the Xazrix homeworld was a swirling nebula of dust and gas. A collective gasp resonated across the bridge. Jarek had a strange mix of emotions, relief, awe, and a touch of sadness. A civilization, however brutal, had been wiped out in an instant. Madeline placed a hand on his shoulder. It's over, Jarek, she said, her voice gentle. The war is won. Jarek looked into her eyes, a lifetime of shared experiences reflected there. He had found a purpose, a home, and perhaps even love, amidst the chaos of war. Together, they had stared into the abyss and emerged victorious. The future stretched before them, uncertain yet full of possibility. The galaxy was theirs to rebuild, and they, the unlikely heroes forged in the fires of war, would lead the way. The victory echoed across the cosmos, a tremor felt in the very fabric of space. Celebrations erupted on the bridge of the human flagship, cheers and tears intermingling as the weight of years of oppression lifted. Jarek, however, felt a pang of unease amidst the euphoria. Madeline, sensing his disquiet, squeezed his shoulder. It's done, Jarek, she said, her voice soft yet firm. We did what we had to do. He nodded, gazing out at the swirling nebula where the Xazrix homeworld once stood. A terrible beauty hung in the void, a reminder of the destructive power they now wielded. But at what cost? He murmured. Madeline's smile faltered. The cost of freedom is always high, she said, her voice heavy. But the Xazrix would have consumed countless worlds. We ended their reign before it could truly begin. Jarek knew she was right logically. Yet a shadow of doubt lingered. The sunburst weapon, a marvel of ethyl engineering, felt more like a curse than a blessing. Its power was immense, but wielding it felt like balancing on a knife's edge. We need to dismantle it, he said finally, his voice cutting through the celebratory chatter. The sunburst is too dangerous. Imagine it falling into the wrong hands. Madeline's brows furrowed. The Ethel disagree. They see it as a deterrent, a way to ensure lasting peace. A flicker of something akin to suspicion crossed her eyes. Do you not trust them, Jarek? Jarek hesitated. The Ethel had been invaluable allies, their technology and knowledge tipping the scales in their favor. But their motives remained shrouded. I believe in peace, Madeline, he said carefully. But true peace comes from understanding, not fear. Madeline studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. We will discuss this further with the Ethel Council. For now, let us celebrate the victory we have earned. The following days were a whirlwind of diplomatic meetings and victory parades. Jarek found himself hailed as a hero, the Starborn warrior, who had led the rebellion. He reveled in the elation of the crowds, the sense of purpose that had driven him for so long. Yet, the weight of his newfound fame sat heavy on his shoulders. Jarek stared out the viewport, the swirling nebula where the Xazrix homeworld once stood a constant reminder of their victory's cost. Madeline stood beside him, but the usual warmth in her eyes was replaced by a flicker of unease that mirrored his own. The cheers echoing from the crew decks felt hollow now, replaced by a gnawing sense of doubt. "We did what we had to do," Madeline said, her voice breaking the silence. But even she couldn't quite mask the tremor of uncertainty. Jarek nodded, his throat tight. "But at what price?" He replayed the scene in his mind, the blinding light engulfing the planet, the deafening silence that followed. It had been a horrifying display of power, a stark contrast to the ideals of freedom and peace they had fought for. "The Ethel see it as a deterrent," Madeline continued, her voice carefully neutral. "A fail-safe to prevent another Xazrix from rising. A weapon so powerful it could end an entire civilization is a deterrent?" Jarek scoffed. "It's a tyrant's dream, a threat cloaked in the guise of security." Madeline turned to him, her gaze sharp. "But it won the war, Jarek. It stopped the Xazrix from consuming countless worlds. And what if it falls into the wrong hands?" Jarek countered. "Imagine it wielded by a power-hungry leader, someone who doesn't share our ideals. The galaxy wouldn't stand a chance." Madeline remained silent, her expression unreadable. Jarek knew she understood his concern. The sunburst weapon was a double-edged sword. It had saved them, but its existence cast a long shadow over their newfound peace. "We can't keep it, Madeline," Jarek finally said, his voice firm. "The potential for misuse is too great. We have to find a way to dismantle it, to repurpose its technology for something good." Madeline studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "We will discuss it with the Ethel Council. But be prepared for resistance. They view the sunburst as a marvel, a testament to their ingenuity." Jarek knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The Ethel, for all their wisdom, had a certain detachment, a cold logic that sometimes bordered on ruthlessness. But he was determined. The sunburst weapon, a symbol of their victory, had become a symbol of something else entirely, a constant reminder of the fine line between power and destruction. They had to find a way to move beyond it, to forge a future where peace wasn't secured through fear, but through trust and cooperation. Meanwhile, tensions simmered between the humans and the Ethel. The Ethel Council, a collective intelligence housed within a vast, orbiting structure, remained adamant about keeping the sunburst weapon operational. Jarek, supported by Madeline and a growing contingent of human delegates, argued for its destruction. The debate reached a fever pitch during a tense council session. Jarek, his voice ringing with conviction, laid out his vision for a future built on trust and cooperation, not domination. He spoke of the potential for the Ethel technology to uplift all civilizations, not hold them hostage. A long, pregnant silence followed his speech. Then, a low, resonating voice filled the chamber, emanating from the Ethel Council itself. "We have listened to your words, Starborn warrior," it boomed. "Your arguments hold merit. Perhaps there is another way." A wave of relief washed over Jarek. The Ethel Council had conceded. The sunburst weapon would be dismantled, its power repurposed for peaceful applications. The following weeks were dedicated to dismantling the weapon and forging a new alliance between the various races. Jarek, Madeline, and representatives from the Ethel, Necris, Kithrii, and countless other liberated worlds formed a galactic council, dedicated to rebuilding and fostering peace. Years passed, marked by a period of unprecedented prosperity and collaboration. The sunburst weapon remained a cautionary tale, a reminder of the precipice on which they had stood. Jarek, no longer a soldier but a revered leader, oversaw the construction of a grand space station, a beacon of unity and a testament to their hard-won peace. One day, as Jarek gazed out at the bustling space station, a familiar hand touched his shoulder. Madeline stood beside him, her eyes sparkling with a familiar fire. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she said. Jarek smiled, a warmth spreading through him. "It is," he agreed. A far cry from the desolate battlefields we once knew. Madeline leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. There's still much to explore, Jarek. New worlds, new possibilities. Jarek's heart quickened. He knew what she was suggesting. A new adventure together. They had fought and bled for this peace, and now they were being offered the chance to explore the infinite reaches of the galaxy, to leave their mark on the universe. I would like that, he said softly, his voice barely audible over the hum of the station. To see what wonders lie beyond our own little corner of the cosmos. Madeline's face lit up with excitement. Then let's do it, she said, her voice firm and resolute. Let's leave our mark on the galaxy, together. She placed her hand over his, their fingers intertwining. We've faced adversity and emerged stronger. We've led armies and forged alliances. Now it's time to see where our destiny truly lies. Together, they turned toward the grand viewport, staring out at the infinite stars, each one a beacon of hope and possibility. The weight of their newfound responsibility settled heavily on their shoulders, but they knew that they were ready. They were prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead, as long as they had each other. As they walked away from the viewport, their footsteps echoing through the grand hall, Jarek leaned in close to Madeline. Where shall we go first? He asked, his voice filled with anticipation. Madeline smiled, her eyes shining with determination. I've always dreamed of visiting a world where the sky is made of diamonds and the oceans of sapphires. A place where every sunrise is a symphony of colors. She paused, taking a deep breath. That sounds like the adventure we need. Jarek nodded, his heart swelling with love and admiration for her. Then let's find that world, my love, he said, and make it our home. Together, they set off toward the launch bay, their steps firm and sure, their hearts full of hope and wonder. The universe awaited their arrival, and they were ready to leave their mark upon it. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories, give us a like if you want to see more, and drop a comment below to let us know your thoughts.